Welcome to this lesson. You might be wondering what these two guys are doing in front of you. So that is because today we're beginning another section of the topic genetics. And in the previous section, we did introduce what genetics is, and we talked about a lot of terms and concepts or ideas in genetics, which by now I should hope you are getting comfortable around with definition and understanding of the terms. That is what a gene is. We did mention what a gene is. Basically, it stores information. It's a protein. We talked about a gene can be recessive or it can be dominant, and we can have the dominant one showing in the phenotype even when it's heterozygous, even if the organism is heterozygous for that gene, and the recessive one showing only when the organism is homozygous. So those are the things that we talked about, and lots of them, and I want you to get comfortable around those terms, learn them, try to understand them. So the more you expose yourself to these terms, the easier it will be for you to grasp the idea, and the concepts will just kind of sink in. So let's begin with today's lesson, starting with we'll come back to these two guys. So in today's lesson, we're going to discuss variation. And of course, I know we know variation from different ideas in different areas of study, scientific study, mathematics, and other areas. So this is the biological section of variation that we're going to look at, and to be specific, that is on genetics. So how does variation comes in when you talk about genetics? So to vary basically means like to have another version of something, or to be a bit different. Okay, this one, it varies from the other. We basically say they've got features which the other guy or the other person does not have, hence the word variation. Okay, in biology we take it definitely like that meaning, variation. So variation, what does it refer to when it formally in genetics? What does it mean, and how do we understand this concept? So variation is all the difference in terms of the physical characteristics that exist between animals or organisms or members of the same species. So if within the same species you've got differences in terms of the physical characteristics, we're not talking about the ones we're not able to see, like things such as personality and all. We're talking about the physical characteristics, and immediately when mention physical characteristics, things that should come to your mind are color, height, the size, and the texture and things like that. So these are the things that should come to your mind when you mention physical characteristics. So the differences in these physical characteristics that might happen between the members of the same species are what we call variation. It might happen that you have a distant cousin or somebody else in your family, basically, who you have got differences in terms of looks. Maybe they've got they're shorter than you, or they're taller than you, or they've got blue eyes, they've got brown eyes. Oh, their skin is a little bit different from yours. So basically, these are differences, and these are what we call that is variation when it comes to biology. So I've just mentioned a number of differences here: eye color, height, skin, and things like that. So we can group variations into two. There are two kinds of variation. There's what we call a continuous variation and a discontinuous variation. Now, what is a continuous variation? A continuous variation is one which is affected by genes and the environment. So two things there: genes and the environment. Now, we didn't mention that a gene is a protein. A gene controls the physical characteristic, a particular, it contains the information for a particular tissue or physical characteristic of an organism. So basically it has the information about what the color of your hair should be, the color of your skin, how tall should be. All that information was you inherited that information from your parents, and it was stored in the genes that we got from parents. So people might vary because they got different genes from we've got different genes, or members might vary of a species because they've got different genes. Now remember, this is important here. We're talking about varying of members within the same species. Like we talk about the human species or the animal species. Within that species, the members vary, and that is what we are focusing on. That is variation within the same kind or the same species. That is, continuous variation is affected by the genes and the environment. Now, it could happen that probably we have the same parents, or some of you might have the same parents as someone, but there are some differences maybe in one or two things. Let's say skin color. Let's say one person spent most of their time or childhood in another country, and you are in another country, but you basically have the same parents. It might happen that the other person might have different skin color from yours, but you're within the same family. Well, how does that come about? You feel like you have the same genes. That can happen. So those are the things whereby we now consider the environment. Others might have a bigger body size compared to others, but they're within the same family, having the same parents. So we might talk about the environment. Maybe they grew up in an environment where food and everything is already there, and the other person grew up in an environment which didn't see much of that. So that is a continuous variation. We are talking about the environment as well as the genes. Okay, so those are some things we can talk about. And then we've got the discontinuous variation. Now these are the pretty straightforward and critical differences. They are affected only by genes, and the environment is not into the equation here. Only the genes affect these physical characteristics or variation. So variation is in two types. We've got continuous variation and discontinuous variation. Continuous variation is affected by genes and the environment. Discontinuous is only affected by the genes.